Hello friends, there's an art and a science behind good teaching, but it's also easy for teachers to get stuck into a routine, to keep the head down and maybe teach to the middle. More than ever, schools are a multicultural mix where teachers have very different experiences, therefore different training, different expectations, but with no easy way to come together with a shared understanding of what high quality learning looks like. So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate a practical toolkit that can literally be in everyone's hands, that's the result of 3 decades of experience of leading schools around the world. Actually, 2 toolkits. Now, lots of schools have been working to create their own definition of learning within their school's unique context, but this can often be seen as an empty paper exercise. Schools frequently lack the tools to actually translate this into a shared language and approach to impactful learning across the school. It's not dissimilar to school leadership, say, spending time on a beautiful mission statement that's little more than a wall decoration and doesn't actually get reflected across the school and how it's implemented. And here's the thing, we know that there's an ever-increasing burden on teachers. There's reporting and administration and keeping up with developments, and this often leaves teachers feeling burnt out and frazzled. So on the one hand, as leaders, we know how important it is to have a common approach to learning, to help reduce the fragmented learning experiences and expectations for the students. But on the other hand, we struggle to know how best to engage with the teachers and their ongoing development, because we know how easy it is to feel swamped by lengthy articles on educational research and theory, and today, especially digital overload. The Learning Deck is a tangible card-based framework designed to help provide a common language and approach to learning, designed to be concise. This format encourages a more playful, visible, and interactive approach and gets teachers away from sitting behind their laptop screens. The power of the Learning Deck is its ability to simplify the complexities of learning, thereby bridging the gap for teachers with diverse experiences and backgrounds, so that there can be a shared understanding of what's important, and which also provides concrete teaching strategies that align with impactful learning. The Simple Impact Framework identifies common principles, which helps focus teachers to design learning experiences to inform, as knowledge leads to intelligence, to use guided inquiry strategies to nurture curiosity and reflection, and ultimately inspire students so they develop a purpose and a passion for learning. And it goes without saying that we want learners to enjoy their experiences and to build strong relationships that not only develops a sense of belonging, but also help support the learning process. We want them to engage fully, as it's only through engagement that students can really develop the skills and strategies to maximize the process of learning, and ultimately to become empowered to apply their learning in positive ways, creating meaning and exploring new possibilities. Now, of these 6 learning principles, these 3 are very much within the domain of the teacher's design, while these other 3 are the anticipated ways in which the students are affected. This way of viewing the learning principles, therefore, creates a table or matrix where the different areas describe a different style of learning experience. The teacher has very direct control at the planning stage of strategies to inform, to inquire, and inspire. And you can't always accurately predict how a lesson will go, but teachers do need to anticipate the different dynamics and have intentional strategies to develop student learning. These 2 axes can be thought of as a continuum. The word hierarchy would imply one is more important than the other, but I tend to think of it as foundational and aspirational. We can view inform and enjoy as foundational elements of learning experiences, without which we're unlikely to have an environment that would support learner risk-taking and agency. But equally, it's not a race to the upper right quadrant. It's about purpose and balance and intentional strategies to build learner confidence and skills. So looking at these foundations, we all know how powerful social dynamics in the classroom can be, and in particular the emotional state of the students is crucial for effective learning. And so providing a strong and supportive learning culture within the classroom is really important. We know how important it is for children to feel safe and a sense of belonging, and have the support of their peers and the security to push themselves to take risks in their learning. But we also know that effective schooling is much more than just being nice to each other and simply making information available to the learners. Now, I want to take a pause for a moment and think about how AI is going to have such a monumental impact on our current and future students. 50 years ago, the introduction of digital calculators shifted the world of mathematics education away from manual arithmetic calculations towards actually applying mathematics to solve more complex problems, rather than being bogged down in just the arithmetic. Students were then expected to know how to use the calculator in more complex, challenging calculations, but it was still important to have a sense of whether the solution was correct. 30 years ago, the internet revolution changed the educational landscape again and showed us that memorizing data was largely irrelevant in the Google-driven world. Our students now regularly use massive data available online, and our biggest challenges are that students need to have a sense of authenticity in the data origin. Now in the AI revolution, our children have access to unimaginable power to create and manipulate data. So what? Why is this important? Well, think about it. With this backdrop, we have to prepare our children for this new world. If we simply hold on to traditional approaches of teaching, we're not preparing them for this dynamic and exponential world. We have to identify the enduring skills that are going to help them navigate this successfully, to have a moral compass, a sense of authenticity, and an ability to be human among the world of avatars and AI-generated content. So what are these crucial elements? Well, like with the calculator and the internet, our students need to have a sense of understanding if the data is correct. Easier said than done, of course. And it takes critical thinking to ask really good questions and maybe to use AI as any tool, one that can do the heavy lifting, but without taking away our own ability to think and understand. Our students will need to be able to collaborate and communicate effectively and to feel empowered to be able to apply their learning in new and evolving environments. And we mustn't lose sight of the need to ensure that our learners have the grit and determination that will help them succeed in this uncertain world. Think about it. Our teaching strategies therefore need to evolve fully to engage and empower learners while developing these higher order thinking skills. Benjamin Bloom had it right when he described the different levels of learning. And if learning is to be genuinely impactful and relevant for this uncertain future, we need to craft learning experiences that balance skill development, conceptual understanding, and the character traits that are going to be necessary for success. How do we do that? How do we ensure that the learning experience can be streamlined for the students so we're not actually introducing unnecessary friction? And we're leveraging common approaches to learning, a common language and strategies that can be consistent across teachers, classes, and grades. In my experience, many educators really struggle to wrap their head around learning impact. It's easier for teachers to think of inputs, the kind of resources that support the learning experiences in the classroom. It's easier to think of outputs or outcomes, the scores, the posters, the artifacts that are generated. But it's often harder for teachers to identify the impact on learning, which is ultimately what nudges the needle towards our highest aspirations of learning. So each of these profiles clearly articulates the teacher practice, what we set out to do to nurture this, in the learning profile and the learning approach. And it also clearly identifies the impact on learning to help everyone in the school, regardless of grade level and subject, to develop a shared language of learning and a common goal of high-quality learning experiences that truly develop Bloom's higher-order thinking skills. Arguably more essential for the 21st century than it was when it was derived 70 years ago. And to further bridge the gap, to create impactful learning experiences, the learning deck comes complete with 5 sets of cards that cover assessment for learning, approaches to learning, questions for learning, language for learning or EAL support, and support for learning. Each of these supporting cards have the learning impact clearly articulated that traces back to the learning principles, along with practical examples of how to implement them. So, for example, just imagine a new student joining your class. It's not uncommon to have children with language or learning needs identified early on. Think about how powerful it would be to be able to identify a card for some starting strategies for the teachers to use. But now think how that might be from the child's perspective, where there were consistent strategies that were being used in different lessons by different teachers. No longer a fragmented learning experiences with different approaches and different language, but a more streamlined starting point. Don't get me wrong, this isn't the panacea that solves every problem, but it provides a solid starting point to common problems and a shared language and approach to solve them. And let's not underestimate the importance of the assessment for learning, approaches to learning, and questions for learning. These cover precisely those strategies to help develop resilience, collaboration, growth mindset, and critical thinking that are so crucial for learners. I know we're all experts in learning, and yet there are so many nuances to consider. For example, here's one of my favorite cards from the Assessment for Learning pack. Asking a learner why may not be the optimal assessment question, as it can often trigger the need to defend their decision rather than exploring other possibilities with an open mind. I've been there. I've asked children why many times. And it's through seeing them shut down or double down that I've realized that this is not the best question. In my early career, I might have thought it very straightforward. Why did you divide by this or multiply by that? I was trying to understand the thought process. But the question why was not the right question. The student doesn't set out to be wrong, and why as a question gets them self-doubting, or they're embarrassed, or they're dismissive and they shut down. I realized I needed a different approach. Encourage openness and constructive formative assessment conversations through intentional questions. Opt for neutral, non-judgmental language that helps create a growth mindset. So for instance, rather than asking, why did you do that? Try, I'm interested to understand your thought process behind this choice, or what were your alternative thoughts that you had before deciding on that strategy? But I did say that they were actually toolkits, where the learning deck provides strategies for a common approach and a language of learning across the school. The praxis deck is more of a developmental tool. Using the same principles and profiles, this deck provides clear, actionable strategies that support responsive student-centered learning. Each of the 9 profiles is expanded with insights and practical strategies for developing intentional breadth of learning experiences and teacher practice. So where the learning deck has strategies to support learning by providing approaches that can be used for better questions, better assessment, and approaches to learning, the praxis deck illuminates practical ways how teachers can expand on their teaching repertoire, broad versus deep. The learning deck to bridge the gap for a common language and a shared understanding of learning across the school. The praxis deck for professional development, coaching conversations, and personal reflection. A way to reflect on lessons and maybe visualize a kind of heat map to understand if you're having the kind of impact you planned when trying to develop these higher order thinking skills and traits of resilience and determination. Hopefully this gives you something to think on, to pause and reflect on.